Dante Richardson, 17, brilliant and black, stood at the podium in Westside Preparatory Academy's auditorium, his voice carrying with the practiced confidence of a debate champion. Before we dive deeper into this moment that would change everything, I want to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our storytelling community. Now, let's understand how a promising young man's life collided with a corrupt system on the same day his mother gained the power to fight it.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
Atlanta, Georgia wasn't just any city. With its thriving black middle class, historic civil rights legacy, and gleaming downtown skyline, it projected an image of progress and opportunity. The reality, however, was far more complex. Beneath the veneer of prosperity and equality lay a community with deeply entrenched systems designed to profit from incarceration. The city had changed demographically over the decades, with successful black families like the Richardsons establishing themselves in prestigious neighborhoods, but certain power structures remained firmly in place. Young black men were arrested at rates that defied statistical probability. Sentencing disparities in Fulton County Superior Court were so stark that civil rights organizations had been quietly investigating for years. Private prison corporations had woven themselves into the fabric of Georgia's criminal justice system. This was the America that Dante Richardson had learned to navigate with precision and care. At 17, Dante was exceptional by any standard. Ranked first in his class at Westside Preparatory Academy, captain of the debate team, and already accepted early admission to Princeton for his intended study of constitutional law. His bedroom walls featured academic awards alongside a framed photo of his late father, Jamal Richardson, a civil rights attorney who had died in a car accident 7 years earlier. But none of that would matter when he found himself in the crosshairs of a system designed to consume young black bodies for profit. Regina Elaine Richardson held the distinction of being the first black woman appointed U.S. Attorney General. Her 15-year career as a federal prosecutor specializing in civil rights cases had been distinguished by an uncompromising commitment to justice and the rule of law. At home, she was a fiercely protective single mother who had taught her son to respect the law while understanding that the system wasn't always fair to people who looked like them. Regina represented black excellence, the kind that America pointed to when claiming progress while ignoring the machinery still grinding beneath the surface. The incident that would bring Dante into the corrupt system's grip began innocuously that October evening. He and his best friend, Isaiah Thompson, stopped at a Quick Mart convenience store in their southwest Atlanta neighborhood. According to the store's surveillance footage, they purchased snacks and left at 8:47 p.m. According to that same footage, reviewed by Detective Raymond Foster of the Atlanta Police Department, an armed robbery occurred at 9:03 p.m., 16 minutes after Dante and Isaiah had left. The truth hardly mattered to Detective Foster, who had developed a reputation for closing cases quickly and maintaining the arrest quotas that pleased his handlers at Sentinel Justice Corporation. In his 18 years on the force, he had accumulated 31 civilian complaints, 27 from black residents. None had resulted in disciplinary action. He was exactly the kind of officer that private prison corporations needed, someone willing to manufacture cases to fill cells. Judge Harold Whitfield, who presided over Fulton County Superior Court, was cut from similar cloth. In his 20 years on the bench, sentencing disparities between white and black defendants were so dramatic that his courtroom had become known in the legal community as the pipeline. Those concerns mysteriously disappeared into bureaucratic oblivion whenever raised through official channels. Meanwhile, 600 miles north in Washington, D.C., Regina Richardson stood in the East Room of the White House, her right hand raised, her left hand on a Bible that had belonged to her late husband. Chief Justice Morrison administered the oath of office as cameras captured the historic moment. Regina's voice was steady and clear as she swore to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to faithfully discharge the duties of her office. Dr. Simone Baptiste, Regina's chief of the Civil Rights Division, stood in the crowd, a folder of evidence tucked under her arm. She had been waiting for this moment, for Regina to have the power to act on what they'd been investigating for months. The systematic corruption in Georgia's judicial system, the private prison quotas, the targeting of minority youth, it was all documented already. They just needed the right moment to strike. At the community center in Aden's West End, Dante sat across from Marcus Preacher Johnson, the retired defense attorney who had become his mentor after his father's death. The 58-year-old man's office walls were lined with law books and photos from the civil rights era, including one of him as a young attorney standing beside Jamal Richardson. "Your father would be proud of how you argued that case today," Preacher said, his deep voice carrying the weight of experience and regret. "You got his gift for making people see the truth." "I just wish he could have seen it," Dante replied quietly. Preacher's expression darkened slightly. "Your father died fighting corruption in this system, Dante. Don't ever forget that. His accident—" He paused, then shook his head. "Just remember that standing up for justice always comes with a cost. Always." Dante didn't understand then what Preacher meant. He would soon. That evening, Dante and Isaiah walked into the Quick Mart at 8:47 p.m. Isaiah grabbed a bag of chips and a soda. Dante selected an energy drink and a candy bar. They paid, joked with the cashier about the upcoming basketball game, and left at 8:47 p.m. The store's cameras captured everything. Two teenagers in hoodies, laughing, completely innocent.
16 minutes later, a man in a ski mask entered the same store with a gun. The robbery lasted 3 minutes. The perpetrator fled with $340 and was never caught. But Detective Foster, reviewing the footage the next morning under pressure to meet his monthly arrest quota, saw an opportunity. 2 black teens in hoodies in the area around the time of the robbery. Close enough for a conviction in his experience. Close enough to satisfy the quota. In a windowless office in downtown Atlanta, Judge Whitfield sat across from District Attorney Vincent Caldwell. Between them lay a spreadsheet from Sentinel Justice Corporation showing their monthly quotas and financial incentives. "We're short this month," Caldwell said, tapping the paper. 7 juvenile convictions with sentences over 10 years. That's $140,000 in bonuses we're leaving on the table. Whitfield lit a cigar, leaning back in his leather chair. "I've got 3 cases coming up next week. Street kids, public defenders, open and shut. That should get us closer." "Not enough," Caldwell replied. "Harmon's been clear. They need bodies to fill the new facility in Valdosta. Young ones. Longer sentences mean better returns on investment." "Then we'll find them," Whitfield said simply. "We always do." Neither man mentioned the human cost of their transactions. Neither cared. To them, young black men weren't people with futures. They were commodities with price tags. Regina's swearing-in ceremony concluded with applause and congratulations. She shook hands with senators, judges, and colleagues, all while her phone remained on silent in her purse. Dr. Baptiste caught her eye across the room and gave a slight nod. The investigation was ready. Tomorrow, they would begin reviewing the evidence for formal action. But tomorrow would bring something neither woman expected. At 6:47 a.m. the next morning, Atlanta police kicked in the door of the Richardson home. Dante, still in his pajamas, was dragged from his bed, handcuffed, and arrested for armed robbery. His protests of innocence were ignored. His requests to call his mother were denied. Within 3 hours, he was processed, photographed, and placed in a holding cell at Fulton County Jail. Regina received the call at 9:15 a.m., during her first official briefing as Attorney General. The room fell silent as her phone buzzed insistently. She glanced at the screen, Atlanta Police Department. Her hands went cold. "I need to take this," she said, her voice suddenly tight. The voice on the other end was professional and detached. "Ms. Richardson, this is Sergeant Martinez with Atlanta PD. I'm calling to inform you that your son, Dante Richardson, was arrested this morning and charged with armed robbery. He's being held at—" The room spun. Regina gripped the edge of the conference table, her knuckles white. "There must be a mistake. My son—" "Ma'am, he was positively identified from surveillance footage. The arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow morning." Regina's legal mind kicked in even as her maternal heart shattered. "I'm on my way. Don't let anyone question him without counsel present."
But even as she said it, she knew it was too late. The machinery had already begun grinding. And sitting in that cell, Dante Richardson, brilliant, innocent, and black, was learning what his mother had always feared he would, that in America, none of his achievements would protect him from a system designed to destroy him. The interrogation room at Fulton County Police Department smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation. Dante sat in a metal chair bolted to the floor, his wrists aching from handcuffs that had been tightened just beyond comfortable. Detective Raymond Foster circled him like a predator, a file folder slapping rhythmically against his palm. "Let's go over this again, Dante," Foster said, his voice deceptively casual. "You were at the Quick Mart on October 15th at approximately 9 p.m. I was there at 8:45, Dante corrected, his debate training keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. And I left at 8:47. The robbery happened after I was gone. The timestamps on the surveillance footage will prove." Timestamps can be manipulated, but what we have is you, in a hoodie, at that store, right around the time of the robbery. We have an eyewitness who places you at the scene during the crime. "That's impossible. I wasn't there." Foster smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Here's what I think happened. You're a smart kid, Princeton-bound, come from a good family, but maybe you wanted to prove something. Maybe you wanted to show you weren't soft. Maybe you needed money for something your mama wouldn't approve of." "None of that is true," Dante said firmly. "I want to call my mother. She's the U.S. Attorney General, and she needs to know." The slap came so fast Dante barely saw it coming. Foster's palm cracked across his face, the sound echoing in the small room. Dante's head snapped to the side, his cheek burning. "You think your mama's fancy title means anything in here? In here, you're just another thug who got caught. Now, you can make this easy and confess, or we can do this the hard way. Your choice."
In that moment, Dante understood what his father must have faced, what Preacher had tried to warn him about. The system wasn't designed to find truth. It was designed to process bodies. His body. Black bodies. "I want a lawyer," Dante said quietly. "I'm not saying anything else." Foster straightened, shrugging. "Suit yourself. Public defender will be assigned at arraignment. Until then, you sit." He walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Dante, that fancy hoodie you were wearing? We found it in your closet. Matches the description from our witness perfectly. See you in court." The door slammed, leaving Dante alone in the fluorescent glare, understanding for the first time that innocence might not be enough. 600 miles away, Regina Richardson's private jet touched down at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. She hadn't even unpacked in Washington before racing back to Atlanta. Dr. Simone Baptiste sat beside her, already working her phone, pulling strings, calling in favors. "I've reached out to the best defense attorneys in Atlanta," Simone said. "Marcus Johnson, Preacher, wants to take the case pro bono. He knew Jamal. He knows Dante." "They won't let me see him," Regina interrupted, staring at her own phone where text after text brought worse news. "They're claiming procedural restrictions. Simone, they're blocking me from my own son." Simone's expression hardened. "This is coordinated, Regina. This isn't just bad luck or bureaucratic inefficiency. Someone is actively working against you." At the Fulton County Courthouse, District Attorney Vincent Caldwell stood before a bank of cameras, his expression grave and righteous. "Today we charge Dante Richardson, age 17, with armed robbery, a serious violent felony. This case demonstrates that no one is above the law, not even the children of high-ranking officials. We will prosecute this case vigorously to ensure justice for the victim and accountability for the perpetrator." The journalists shouted questions. "D.A. Caldwell, are you concerned about potential interference from the Attorney General? Is this politically motivated? What evidence do you have?" Caldwell raised his hand for silence. "I want to be clear. This prosecution is based solely on evidence and the law. The defendant was identified through surveillance footage and eyewitness testimony. This is a straightforward case of a young man making a terrible choice. Regardless of his background or his family connections, he will face the full consequences of his actions." Watching from his apartment, Isaiah Thompson felt his phone burn in his pocket. The video was still there, clear, time-stamped footage from his own phone showing him and Dante leaving the Quick Mart at 8:47 p.m., 16 minutes before the robbery. He'd been filming for his social media, just stupid kid stuff, documenting their night. The video proved Dante's innocence. Absolutely, irrefutably proved it. But Isaiah's hands shook when he thought about his older brother, Marcus, sitting in Hancock State Prison on a 15-year sentence for a crime Isaiah wasn't sure he'd committed. He thought about what would happen if he came forward, if Detective Foster's attention turned to him, if his family became targets. His mother knocked on his door. "Isaiah, you okay, baby? I saw the news about Dante." "Yeah, Ma," he managed. "I'm fine." But he wasn't fine, and neither was Dante, and the video stayed on his phone, a secret burning a hole in his conscience. At the Atlanta Independent News offices, Maria Santos pulled up Dante Richardson's case file on her computer screen. For 3 years, she'd been investigating private prison corporations' influence on Georgia's criminal justice system. She documented patterns: young black men, minor charges escalated to felonies, sentences that defied statistical norms, all flowing through the same judges and prosecutors. She opened her database and ran Dante's case through her algorithm. Within seconds, the connections appeared. Judge Harold Whitfield, presiding judge; DA Vincent Caldwell, lead prosecutor; Detective Raymond Foster, arresting officer. The same names that appeared in 87% of the cases she'd flagged as suspicious. "Got you," Maria whispered, her fingers flying across the keyboard. This case was different because the victim had power, had connections. This case could finally blow the whole thing open. Her editor appeared at her cubicle. "Santos, I need you on the Richardson story, but keep it balanced. We don't want to suggest bias before the trial." Maria nodded, but she was already planning a different story, one about systems, not individuals, one about profit motives and corruption, one that would make them all pay attention. At Fulton County Jail, Dante lay on a thin mattress in a cell that smelled of despair and disinfectant. Through the bars, he could see other young faces, most of them black or brown, most of them probably innocent of whatever they'd been charged with, all of them caught in a system that saw them as inventory, not individuals. He thought about his father, about the cases Jamal had fought, about the accident that had taken his life when Dante was 10. Preacher's words echoed in his mind. "Your father died fighting corruption in this system." For the first time, Dante wondered if it had really been an accident at all. His public defender finally arrived at 6 p.m., a woman in her 30s carrying an overstuffed briefcase. Jennifer Torres had 47 active cases and hadn't slept more than 4 hours in a week. "Dante Richardson," she sat across from him in the visiting room, already pulling out forms. "I'm Jennifer Torres, your court-appointed attorney. Your arraignment is tomorrow morning. The prosecution is offering a plea deal. Plead guilty to robbery, recommend 12 years with possibility of parole after 8. "I'm innocent," Dante said. "I wasn't even there when—" "Look," Jennifer interrupted, not unkindly. "I've reviewed the evidence. They have surveillance footage, an eyewitness, and physical evidence. The DA is Vincent Caldwell, who has a 94% conviction rate. Judge Whitfield is presiding, and he doesn't go easy on—" She stopped herself. "On defendants in cases like this. 12 years is better than what you'll get if we go to trial and lose, which we probably will." "My mother is the U.S. Attorney General," Dante said desperately. "She can get better lawyers, she can—" "Your mother's position is exactly why this is being fast-tracked," Jennifer said bluntly. "They want to prove no one gets special treatment. They want to make an example of you. I'm sorry, Dante, but that's the reality." After she left, Dante was led back to his cell. As the steel door clanged shut, he understood with chilling clarity that the system had already decided his fate. The trial would be theater. The verdict was already written. In a luxury hotel suite, Regina Richardson sat with Dr. Simone Baptiste and Preacher Johnson, surrounded by legal documents and case files. "They've stacked the deck," Preacher said, his voice heavy. "Whitfield as judge, Caldwell as prosecutor, Torres as public defender. She's good, but she's drowning in cases, and they've fast-tracked the trial, 2 weeks from now." 2 weeks, Regina's voice cracked. "That's not enough time to prepare a defense." "That's the point," Simone said. "They want this over before you can leverage federal resources or public attention. They want Dante convicted and sentenced before anyone realizes what's happening." Regina stood, pacing like a caged animal. "There has to be something, some legal avenue." "There is," Preacher said quietly, "but you're not going to like it. We let them think they've won. We let the trial proceed, and while they're focused on that, we build the bigger case, the conspiracy case. Because, Regina, this isn't just about Dante. This is about hundreds of kids who've been fed into this system. And if we move too soon, they'll circle the wagons and we'll never prove it." Regina stopped, her eyes blazing. "You're asking me to sacrifice my son to catch the people who framed him. I'm asking you to trust that we can do both. But it means Dante has to be strong. It means we all do." In his cell, Dante closed his eyes and thought about the debate he had won the day before his arrest. The topic had been whether the American justice system truly delivered justice for all. He'd argued that it did, that the system had flaws but was fundamentally sound. He'd been so naive, so privileged in his naivety. Tomorrow he would face arraignment. In 2 weeks, a trial. And unless something changed, in a few months, he would be serving life in prison for a crime he didn't commit, while the people responsible collected their bonuses and moved on to their next victim. The machinery of injustice ground on, indifferent to innocence, fueled by profit and protected by power. But what that machinery didn't know is that it had finally caught someone whose mother had the power to dismantle it completely. The question was whether that power would be enough and whether it would come in time. The Fulton County Superior Courtroom was a study in architectural intimidation. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, and the seal of Georgia mounted behind the judge's bench, all designed to remind those who entered that the power of the state was absolute. On a cold November morning, the gallery filled with spectators, journalists, and community members who'd heard about the case of the Attorney General's son being tried for armed robbery. Dante Richardson sat at the defense table in a suit his mother had brought him, looking younger than his 17 years despite his height and broad shoulders. His hands were folded on the table, steady despite the tremor he felt inside. Jennifer Torres sat across from him, her briefcase open, her expression resigned. At the prosecution table, District Attorney Vincent Caldwell arranged his notes with theatrical precision. He'd dressed carefully for this moment, his best suit, an American flag pin on his lapel, the image of law and order incarnate. This case would make his gubernatorial campaign. The media was already calling it the trial of the century. A powerful black family forced to reckon with their son's criminal choices. Except Dante hadn't made any criminal choices. But truth, he was learning, was a luxury the justice system couldn't always afford. "All rise!" The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "The Superior Court of Fulton County is now in session, the Honorable Harold Whitfield presiding." Judge Whitfield entered with the bearing of a man who'd wielded power for so long he'd forgotten it wasn't his birthright. At 62, his silver hair and distinguished features made him look like Central Casting's idea of a judge. Only the hardness in his eyes, visible to those who knew to look, revealed his true nature. He settled into his chair, surveyed the courtroom, and his gaze landed on Dante. For just a moment, something like satisfaction flickered across his face. "Please be seated," Whitfield said, his voice carrying easy authority. "We are here today for the trial of Dante Marcus Richardson,
charged with armed robbery under Georgia Code 16-841. Will counsel please state their appearances for the record? Vincent Caldwell for the state of Georgia, Your Honor. Jennifer Torres for the defense, Your Honor. In the gallery's third row, Regina Richardson sat with her spine straight and her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She'd been warned that any outburst, any appearance of trying to influence the proceedings would be used against Dante. So she sat silent, watching her son's future being decided by a corrupt judge and an ambitious prosecutor. Beside her, Dr. Simone Baptiste took notes, her trained eye catching every procedural irregularity, every subtle manipulation. They were building a case within a case. This trial's injustice would become evidence of the larger conspiracy. 2 rows back, Isaiah Thompson sat with his phone in his pocket, the video that could free his best friend weighing on his conscience like a stone. His mother sat beside him, praying quietly, unaware of the power her son held to end this nightmare. "Mr. Caldwell," Judge Whitfield said, already moving things along, "you may present your opening statement." Caldwell stood, buttoning his jacket, and approached the jury box. He'd spent hours selecting this jury, working people, mostly white, mostly older, people who'd respond to law and order rhetoric and see a young black man as a threat regardless of his accomplishments. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for your service. The case before you is both simple and tragic. Simple in its facts, tragic in its implications." He paused for effect. On the night of October 15th, a hard-working store clerk named Mr. Patel was terrorized by an armed robber who stole $340 and left him fearing for his life. That robber was Dante Richardson. In the gallery, Regina's jaw clenched. The lie was so brazen, so complete. Now, the defense will tell you that Mr. Richardson is a good student, that he comes from a good family, that he had everything going for him. And those things are true. But they make his crime more inexcusable, not less. Dante Richardson had opportunities most people can only dream of. Yet he chose to put on a hoodie, walk into that store, and commit a violent felony. Why? Perhaps he wanted excitement. Perhaps he wanted to prove something. Perhaps he simply believed that his family's connections would protect him from consequences. But in this courtroom, there are no special privileges. There is only evidence, and that evidence will prove beyond any reasonable doubt that Dante Richardson is guilty. He returned to his table, satisfied. The narrative was set. Privileged kid thinks he's above the law. Jennifer Torres stood for the defense. She looked exhausted, outmatched, and she knew it, but she was going to fight anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution wants you to believe this is a simple case. It's not. They want you to believe that surveillance footage and a questionable eyewitness prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt. They don't. She moved toward the jury, her voice gaining strength. Dante Richardson is not on trial because of evidence. He's on trial because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time and because it was convenient for someone to make him fit the description of a crime he didn't commit. Judge Whitfield shifted in his chair, a subtle signal of his displeasure. The prosecution will show you a grainy video of someone in a hoodie. They will parade an eyewitness whose testimony has inconsistencies I will expose. What they won't show you is proof, real, substantial proof that Dante Richardson committed this crime. Because that proof doesn't exist. He is innocent. She sat down, and Dante felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe. "Mr. Caldwell, call your first witness," Judge Whitfield said, already moving things along. The state calls Detective Raymond Foster.
Foster took the stand with the confident swagger of a man who testified hundreds of times. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down with a slight smile. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Caldwell led him through the testimony like a choreographed dance. The 911 call, the response to the scene, the review of surveillance footage, the identification of Dante as a suspect. "And can you describe the defendant's demeanor when you arrested him?" Caldwell asked. "Hostile and uncooperative," Foster lied smoothly. "He claimed he had an alibi, that he'd left before the robbery, but he couldn't provide any proof. When I attempted to question him, he became aggressive and demanded a lawyer. In my experience, innocent people want to help clear things up. Guilty people lawyer up immediately." In the gallery, Regina bit her lip hard enough to taste blood. Every word was poison, every lie presented as fact. Jennifer cross-examined, trying to poke holes in Foster's timeline, but he'd crafted his testimony carefully. Every inconsistency had an explanation. Every doubt had a counterargument. The parade of prosecution witnesses continued. The store clerk, Mr. Patel, whose memory of the robber's face had somehow become crystal clear in the weeks since the crime, despite his initial statement that the robber wore a mask. An expert witness who testified that the hoodie found in Dante's closet matched fibers found at the scene, despite the fact that it was a mass-produced item sold at every Target in Georgia. And then the star witness, Marcus Webb, a man with 3 prior convictions who claimed he'd been walking past the Quick Mart and seen Dante Richardson run out with a gun. "Are you certain it was the defendant you saw?" Caldwell asked. "Absolutely," Webb said. "I got a clear look at his face. It was him." Jennifer cross-examined aggressively. "Mr. Webb, isn't it true that you were offered a deal on pending charges in exchange for your testimony?" "Objection," Caldwell said smoothly. "Relevance." "Overruled," Judge Whitfield said, but his tone suggested the damage was done. "The witness may answer." "I was offered consideration, yeah, but that don't mean I'm lying. I saw what I saw." The day dragged on. By late afternoon, when court recessed, the prosecution had presented its case, a tower of lies carefully constructed, nearly impossible to tear down without the evidence that Isaiah had on his phone. That evening, Isaiah sat in Dante's old room at the community center, where Preacher Johnson found him staring at his phone. "You have something that could help him, don't you?" Preacher said quietly. Isaiah's hands shook. "If I show it to them, if I come forward." "You're afraid of what happened to your brother happening to you. I understand that fear, son, I do. But I've spent my whole life watching innocent people go to prison because witnesses were too scared to speak up, and I've carried that weight every day since." "I don't know if I can do it," Isaiah whispered. "Then you need to decide whether you can live with yourself if you don't." The next day, the defense presented its case. It was thin, character witnesses who testified to Dante's good character, which Judge Whitfield openly dismissed as irrelevant to the charges. An alibi that couldn't be proven without Isaiah's video. Jennifer Torres fought hard, but she was one overworked public defender against the full resources of the state. Finally, Dante himself took the stand. "Mr. Richardson," Jennifer said gently, "can you tell the jury where you were on the night of October 15th? Dante took a breath, looking directly at the jury. 7 years of debate training taught him how to speak clearly, how to project confidence and truth. But he'd never imagined using those skills to defend his own freedom. "I was at the Quick Mart with my friend Isaiah at approximately 8:45 p.m. We bought snacks. We left at 8:47 p.m. before the robbery ever occurred. I went home, did homework, and went to bed. I didn't rob anyone. I would never rob anyone. I'm innocent."
The words hung in the air, simple and true. Caldwell approached for cross-examination like a shark sensing blood. "Mr. Richardson, you're quite the accomplished speaker, aren't you? Captain of the debate team." "Yes, sir." "So you're trained in the art of persuasion, of making people believe you even when you're arguing a position you don't personally hold. Isn't that the essence of debate?"
"Objection," Jennifer said. "Argumentative." "Sustained," Judge Whitfield said, but the seed was planted. Caldwell continued, picking apart Dante's testimony, suggesting his very articulateness was proof of deception. By the time he finished, Dante felt like his greatest strengths had been weaponized against him. Closing arguments came next. Caldwell painted Dante as a privileged young man who thought he could get away with anything. Jennifer fought back, arguing reasonable doubt, pointing out inconsistencies. But Regina, watching from the gallery, could see it in the jury's eyes. They'd already decided. The verdict was written before deliberations ever began. The jury retired at 3 p.m. They returned at 5 p.m. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Whitfield asked. "We have, Your Honor." The foreman, a middle-aged white man in a plaid shirt, stood with a piece of paper that would determine Dante's future. In the case of the state of Georgia versus Dante Marcus Richardson on the charge of armed robbery, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Dante's hands gripped the edge of the defense table. Regina stood, a sound escaping her throat that was equal parts rage and anguish. In the back, Isaiah Thompson felt his phone burning in his pocket, knowing he could have prevented this, knowing his silence had condemned his best friend. Judge Whitfield banged his gavel, calling for order. "The defendant will rise for sentencing." Dante stood on shaking legs. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. "Mr. Richardson," Whitfield began, and there was satisfaction in his voice that made Regina's blood run cold. "You have been found guilty of a serious, violent felony. This court believes that your actions, your willingness to terrorize an innocent victim for monetary gain, demonstrate a fundamental disregard for the law and the safety of others. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The words hit like a physical blow. Life, without parole, for a crime he didn't commit. The courtroom erupted again. Dante's hands gripped the edge of the defense table. Regina stood, a sound escaping her throat that was equal parts rage and anguish. In the back, Isaiah Thompson felt his phone burning in his pocket, knowing he could have prevented this, knowing his silence had condemned his best friend. Judge Whitfield banged his gavel, calling for order. "Mr. Richardson," Judge Whitfield said coldly, "you are disrupting these proceedings. Bailiff, please remove her from my courtroom." As bailiffs moved toward Regina, Dante found his voice. "Wait, I get a phone call, don't I? That's my right. One phone call?" Judge Whitfield paused, clearly wanting to deny even this, but too many eyes were watching. "Fine, make it quick." A bailiff handed Dante a phone. His hands shook as he dialed the number he knew by heart, his mother's direct line at the Department of Justice. In the courtroom, Regina's own phone rang. She pulled it from her purse, seeing Dante's name on the screen. Their eyes met across the courtroom, and in that moment, something fundamental shifted. "Mom, I need you to know I love you, and I need you to fight. Not just for me, for all of them, because this isn't justice, and you have the power to stop it." Regina's tears fell freely now, but her voice was steel. "I will, baby. I promise you, I will tear this system down brick by brick." Judge Whitfield stood. "That's enough. Bailiffs, take the prisoner into custody." As they moved to take Dante away, Regina locked eyes with Dr. Simone Baptiste across the courtroom. No words were needed. They both knew what came next. This wasn't just about one wrongful conviction anymore. This was war. And Regina Richardson,
the first black woman to serve as U.S. Attorney General, had just been given every reason to use the full power of her office to burn this corrupt system to the ground. Judge Whitfield banged his gavel one final time. This court is adjourned. But the real trial, the one that would determine whether justice could prevail over corruption, whether one mother's love could dismantle an entire conspiracy, whether truth could overcome profit, was only just beginning. The phone call lasted 17 seconds. 17 seconds that would change everything. Dante's voice, steady despite the handcuffs cutting into his wrists, carried across the silent courtroom. "Mom, I need you to know I love you, and I need you to fight. Not just for me, for all of them. Because this isn't justice, and you have the power to stop it." Regina Richardson, the U.S. Attorney General, stood in the gallery with tears streaming down her face, but her voice was pure steel. "I will, baby. I promise you, I will tear this system down, brick by brick." Judge Whitfield's face had gone pale. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. He'd known Regina Richardson held a position of power, but somehow the reality of that power, standing in his courtroom, witnessing his corruption firsthand, had seemed abstract until this moment. "Bailiffs," he said, his voice slightly less certain, "take the prisoner into custody." As they moved toward Dante, Regina stepped into the aisle. "Your Honor, I am formally requesting an immediate appeal and demanding a stay of sentence pending federal review." "Request denied," Whitfield said quickly. "Ms. Richardson, you may hold a federal position, but this is a state court, and I will not have you disrupting—" "Then you leave me no choice." Regina's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "I am putting this court on notice that the United States Department of Justice will be investigating this case, this courtroom, and every official involved in this prosecution for potential civil rights violations and corruption. And Judge Whitfield, I suggest you secure all records immediately, because federal agents will be requesting them shortly." The courtroom erupted. Journalists shouted questions. Spectators stood. Judge Whitfield banged his gavel frantically. "You are in contempt, Ms. Richardson. Bailiffs, remove her from my courtroom." But Regina didn't move. She locked eyes with her son as the bailiffs surrounded him. Dante straightened his shoulders, lifted his chin, and in that moment, Regina saw not the boy she'd raised, but the man he was becoming, even in the face of monstrous injustice. "I love you," she mouthed. "I love you too," he mouthed back. Then they took him away. Outside the courthouse, Regina stood before a bank of microphones, Dr. Simone Baptiste at her side. The November wind whipped her jacket, but she stood unmoved, a force of nature. "Today, I watched my son be sentenced to life in prison for a crime he did not commit. Today, I witnessed what thousands of black mothers across this country witness every day. A system that does not seek justice, but feeds on the bodies of our children for profit." Camera flashes exploded. Journalists pressed forward. "As Attorney General of the United States, I am announcing a formal investigation into the Fulton County Superior Court, the Atlanta Police Department, and all officials involved in my son's prosecution. But this investigation will not stop there. We will examine every case, every conviction, every sentence handed down by Judge Harold Whitfield. We will follow the money. We will expose the corruption. And we will ensure that every person wrongfully convicted receives justice." Inside his car, parked across the street, Robert Harmon, CEO of Sentinel Justice Corporation, watched a press conference on his phone. His hand tightened on the armrest. "Get me Senator Drummond," he said to his assistant. "Now." Back in the courthouse, Judge Whitfield sat in his chambers, his hands shaking as he poured himself a scotch. DA Vincent Caldwell stood by the window watching Regina's press conference on his phone. "She can't do this. This is state jurisdiction, federal overreach. We'll file motions, She's the Attorney General."
Caldwell interrupted quietly. "She can do exactly this. And if she finds what I think she'll find—" He trailed off, calculating his options. Whitfield drained his glass. "Call Harmon. We need to coordinate our response." But Harmon wasn't taking calls. He was too busy calling in political favors and preparing for war. At the Fulton County Jail, Dante was processed into general population. The intake officer, a black man in his 50s, looked at him with something like pity. "Keep your head down, kid. Your mom just declared war on half the justice system in Georgia. That makes you either the safest or the most dangerous inmate in here. Time will tell which is which." Dante was led to a cell block where curious and hostile eyes followed him every step. Word had already spread. The Attorney General's son, convicted of armed robbery, sentenced to life in prison. Some saw him as proof that black excellence meant nothing in America's justice system. Others saw him as a target. In the corner of the common area, a man with gang tattoos watched Dante with particular interest. He'd received a call earlier that day, a job offer, $5,000 to make sure Regina Richardson's son didn't survive long enough for any investigation to matter. Back at her hotel, Regina sat with Dr. Simone Baptiste, Preacher Johnson, and a secure video link to her team in Washington. Her eyes were red, but her voice was clear.
"Simone, I need everything on Judge Whitfield, D.A. Caldwell, and Detective Foster. Financial records, phone logs, every case they've touched. I want a forensic team in Atlanta by morning." "Already done," Simone replied. "Teams are mobilizing now. But Regina, we need to talk about the political situation. Senator Drummond's office has already reached out. She's not happy." "I don't care what Patricia Drummond thinks." "You should," Simone said carefully. "She chairs the committee that controls Justice Department funding. She can make your life very difficult. Let her try." Regina's voice was ice. "My son is facing life in prison for a crime he didn't commit. There is nothing she can threaten me with that matters more than that." Preacher Johnson leaned forward. "Regina, there's something else. Isaiah Thompson came to see me tonight. He has video evidence from that night. Clear footage showing Dante leaving the store before the robbery." Regina's head snapped up. "What? Why didn't he come forward?" "Fear," Preacher said simply. "His brother's doing 15 years. He was terrified of becoming a target. But watching Dante get convicted broke something in him. He wants to help now." "Get that video secured," Regina ordered. "Multiple copies, multiple locations. That's our smoking gun for Dante's appeal. But it's also evidence that Detective Foster knowingly fabricated his case. That turns this from wrongful conviction into criminal conspiracy." The next morning, federal agents executed search warrants at the Fulton County Courthouse, the DA's office, and the Atlanta Police Department. The coordinated raids made national news. Judge Whitfield arrived at his chambers to find FBI agents boxing up his files. D.A. Caldwell's computers were seized. Detective Foster was placed on administrative leave. And in a luxury office in downtown Atlanta, Robert Harmon made a decision. If Regina Richardson wanted war, he would give her war. He picked up his phone and dialed Senator Patricia Drummond's private number. "Patricia, it's time to deploy our contingency plan. Richardson has to be stopped, whatever it takes." On the other end of the line, Senator Drummond smiled coldly. "Consider it done." Within 48 hours of Dante's sentencing, Washington moved with the full weight of federal power. At 6 a.m., teams of FBI agents and federal prosecutors descended on Atlanta. Search warrants, subpoenas, and seizure orders blanketed every office, every courthouse, every police station connected to Dante's case. Dr. Simone Baptiste coordinated from a command center established in a federal building downtown. Wall-mounted screens displayed financial records, case files, phone logs, and surveillance footage. Her team worked in shifts, following money trails that spiderwebbed across state lines. "Look at this," one analyst called out, highlighting a series of wire transfers on the main screen. Monthly payments from Sentinel Justice Corporation to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. The shell company's registered agent? A law firm that represents Judge Whitfield. Simone moved closer, her trained eye scanning the data. How much? $15,000 a month for the past 5 years. That's $900,000. And D.A. Caldwell? Similar pattern, different shell company, same ultimate source, $12,000 monthly. Simone pulled out her phone. Regina needs to see this. At the Fulton County Jail, Dante had survived his first 2 nights. The man with the gang tattoos hadn't made his move yet, waiting for the right moment. But Dante felt the threat like a physical weight. The way eyes followed him in the cafeteria, the whispered conversations that stopped when he passed. A guard approached his cell. "Richardson, you got a visitor, legal." Dante was led to a private visiting room where Preacher Johnson waited, a laptop open on the table between them. "Your mama's raising hell, son," Preacher said with a slight smile. "Federal agents everywhere. They're tearing this whole corrupt system apart. But more importantly, I got something to show you." He turned the laptop screen. Isaiah's video played. Clear, time-stamped footage showing Dante and Isaiah leaving the Quick Mart at 8:47 p.m., 16 minutes before the robbery. Dante's breath caught. This proves I'm innocent. More than that, it proves Detective Foster knew you were innocent when he arrested you. It proves this whole case was a setup. Preacher leaned forward. "We're filing for immediate appeal with this new evidence. Combined with what the federal investigation is finding, we can get you out." "How long?"
Days if we're lucky. Weeks if the system fights back. Your mother's got the best lawyers in the country working on this." But even as hope flickered, Dante knew he wasn't safe. Not yet. Not while powerful people had everything to lose from the truth coming out. In Washington, Regina sat across from Senator Patricia Drummond in the senator's Capitol Hill office. The meeting had been requested urgently. Regina knew it was a trap, but attended anyway. "Attorney General Richardson," Drummond began, her smile cold and practiced, "I've been hearing disturbing reports about your actions in Georgia. I'm conducting a federal civil rights investigation. It's well within my authority." "Your authority?" Drummond's smile sharpened. "You're investigating a case involving your own son. That's not authority, that's personal vendetta. It's an abuse of power." Regina met her gaze steadily. "My son is innocent. The evidence proves it. But this investigation goes far beyond his case. We've already uncovered financial connections between private prison corporations and court officials. This is systematic corruption." "Alleged corruption," Drummond corrected. "You're destroying careers based on preliminary findings. Judge Whitfield has served honorably for 20 years. D.A. Caldwell has one of the highest conviction rates in the state. You're damaging Georgia's entire justice system because you can't accept that your son made a mistake." "My son didn't make a mistake. He was framed." Drummond stood, walking to her window overlooking the Capitol. "Let me be clear, Miss Richardson. I chair the committee that oversees Justice Department funding. I also happen to know several members of Congress who are concerned about your fitness for office. If you continue down this path, if you continue using federal resources for what amounts to a personal crusade, I will have no choice but to call for your resignation, or worse." "Is that a threat, Senator?" "It's a reality check." Drummond turned back to her. "You have power, Regina, but so do I. And I'm telling you, back off this investigation, let Georgia's justice system handle its own affairs, and focus on your actual duties as Attorney General. Do that, and we can all move forward. Continue this witch hunt, and I promise you, your career, your reputation, everything you've worked for will be destroyed." Regina stood slowly, gathering her briefcase. "Senator Drummond, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution and ensure equal justice under law. My son's wrongful conviction proved that justice isn't equal. So I'm going to keep investigating, keep exposing corruption, and keep fighting until the system actually delivers what it promises. And if you want to threaten me with political consequences, go ahead. I've already lost what matters most,
You have nothing left to take." She walked out, leaving Drummond staring after her. But the senator wasn't finished. She picked up her phone and called Robert Harmon. "She won't back down," she said. "Then we escalate," Harmon replied. "I've already made arrangements. The problem will resolve itself within 72 hours. At the Atlanta Independent News, Maria Santos worked late cross-referencing financial records leaked to her by a source inside Sentinel Justice Corporation. What she found made her blood run cold. A nationwide network of corruption spanning 12 states, hundreds of judges and prosecutors on the payroll, and quota systems for juvenile incarceration that explicitly targeted minority communities. This wasn't just about Dante Richardson. This was industrial-scale human trafficking disguised as criminal justice. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Santos, you need to stop publishing stories about Sentinel Justice. This is your only warning." "Who is this?" The line went dead. She looked at her laptop screen, at the evidence that could bring down an empire. Then she hit publish on her latest article. The Prison Pipeline: How Private Corporations Profit from Corrupting Justice. Within hours, it had gone viral. Back at the jail, Dante was returning from the showers when he felt more than saw the movement behind him. Instinct made him turn. The man with gang tattoos held a sharpened piece of metal, fashioned into a crude knife. "Nothing personal, kid. Just business." He lunged.
Dante dodged left, the blade missing his ribs by inches. He grabbed the man's wrist, using leverage from debate team training that translated surprisingly well to physical confrontation. They crashed into the wall, struggling. Guards rushed in, pulling them apart. The weapon clattered to the floor. As they dragged the attacker away, he shouted over his shoulder, "They'll try again. They paid too much money for you to live." Dante stood against the wall, shaking, understanding fully now that his mother's investigation had made him a target. The corrupt system would rather kill him than let him be freed to testify. The attack on Dante made national news. Regina, informed immediately, held an emergency press conference from the Justice Department. "Last night, someone attempted to murder my son in Fulton County Jail," she announced, her voice cutting through the assembled media like a scalpel. "This wasn't random prison violence. This was a coordinated assassination attempt by people who have everything to lose if the truth comes out. I am hereby requesting federal protective custody for Dante Richardson and all witnesses connected to our investigation." Behind the scenes, the backlash intensified. Conservative media outlets, later revealed to be funded by Sentinel Justice through shell companies, ran 24-hour coverage portraying Regina as an out-of-control federal official abusing her power. "Attorney General uses office to protect guilty son," read one headline. "Federal overreach. Richardson weaponizes DOJ for personal vendetta," declared another. Senator Drummond appeared on multiple news programs, expressing deep concern about Regina's fitness for office. "This is exactly the kind of abuse of power the founders warned against," she told one interviewer. "No one, not even the Attorney General, should use federal resources to interfere with state justice systems because of personal grievances." What the media didn't report was Drummond's own financial stake in keeping the truth buried. Stock holdings in Sentinel Justice worth over $4 million, carefully hidden through shell companies and blind trusts. Officer Malik Thompson, who had provided internal police records to federal investigators, arrived home to find his house ransacked and a message spray-painted across his living room wall: "Snitches get stitches." His wife and children had been at her mother's house. They were safe, but the message was clear. He called Dr. Baptiste's secure line. "They know I helped you. My family's in danger. We're arranging protective custody now. Federal marshals will be there within the hour. You did the right thing, Officer Thompson." "The right thing might get my family killed," he replied bitterly.
Esaias Thompson faced his own reckoning. After coming forward with the video evidence, his family's home was vandalized, threatening messages appeared on his social media. Most chillingly, he received a photo of his brother Marcus in prison with a single word: accidents happen. The implication was clear. If Esaias continued cooperating with federal investigators, his brother would pay the price. He sat in Reverend Caldwell's church office, his head in his hands. I can't do this. I can't put Marcus at risk. He's got 13 more years to serve. 13 years where they can get to him any time they want. Reverend Caldwell's voice was gentle but firm. Isaiah, I marched with John Lewis. I was beaten by police in Selma. I've buried too many young men destroyed by this system. And I've learned one truth. Evil persists because good people stay silent out of fear. Your brother wouldn't want you to sacrifice Dante to protect him. How do you know? Because I know what it means to be a black man in America. We protect each other or we all fall. At her apartment, Maria Santos returned from the grocery store to find her door ajar. Her laptop was gone. Her backup drives were smashed. Years of research destroyed in minutes. But what they didn't know was that Maria had already uploaded everything to secure cloud servers. She might have lost the hardware, but the evidence remained. She called Regina directly. They came after me, destroyed my work. Are you safe? For now. But Regina, I found something else. Financial records showing Judge Whitfield wasn't the only one on Sentinel's payroll. There are 7 other judges in Georgia, 3 prosecutors, and, she paused, Senator Patricia Drummond. Regina's voice went quiet. You're certain? Absolutely. She owns $4 million in Sentinel stock through shell companies. She's been protecting this operation from federal oversight for years. Send me everything, encrypted, then get somewhere safe.
The pressure campaign extended to everyone connected to the investigation. Keisha Williams, preparing to testify about her own wrongful conviction, received death threats so specific and terrifying that she withdrew her cooperation. Dr. Baptiste's own brother called, warning her that their mother back in Haiti was receiving visits from concerned individuals asking about Simone's activities. Even Preacher Johnson wasn't spared. The community center he'd built over decades received anonymous threatening calls. Donors suddenly withdrew funding. The message was clear: help Regina Richardson and lose everything. In his private office, Robert Harmon reviewed reports from his security team. The Attorney General is isolated. Her witnesses are scared. Her allies are backing away. Senator Drummond is preparing impeachment proceedings. We've weathered the storm. Now we just need to... His assistant interrupted. Sir, you need to see this. She turned on the television. Dr. Simone Baptiste was holding a press conference, flanked by FBI agents and federal prosecutors. Today, the United States Department of Justice is announcing RICO charges against Sentinel Justice Corporation, CEO Robert Harmon, Judge Harold Whitfield, District Attorney Vincent Caldwell, Detective Raymond Foster, and 17 other co-conspirators across 12 states. We have evidence of systematic corruption, bribery, quota systems for juvenile incarceration, and murder in the case of civil rights attorney Jamal Richardson. Harmon's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Whose death, 7 years ago, has been re-examined and is now classified as homicide, connected to his investigation of private prison corruption. These indictments represent the largest prosecution of judicial corruption in American history. Regina appeared on screen beside Simone. My husband died fighting this system. My son was nearly killed by it. But today, we fight back. Today, justice begins. The screen filled with booking photos, financial records, and evidence of the conspiracy. The coverage went global within minutes. In his cell at Fulton County Jail, Dante watched the press conference on the common room television, surrounded by inmates who now looked at him with something approaching respect.
He'd survived the assassination attempt. His mother had just declared war on the entire corrupt system. And for the first time since his arrest, Dante allowed himself to believe that justice might actually be possible. But in Washington, Senator Drummond made a phone call to allies in Congress. "We're moving forward with impeachment proceedings against Attorney General Richardson. This ends now." The battle had only just begun. Officer Malik Thompson sat in a federal safehouse, staring at the files spread across the table. Before his suspension, he'd copied everything: Detective Foster's emails, financial records, communications with Robert Harmon showing direct payment for arrests and convictions. Dr. Baptiste's forensic team worked through the night, tracing money from Sentinel Justice Corporation through shell companies to corrupted officials across 12 states. The evidence was overwhelming. Judge Whitfield had received $900,000, D.A. Caldwell $720,000. But the most devastating discovery came when they examined old case files. Jamal Richardson's car accident 7 years ago wasn't an accident. Brake line tampering, covered up by the same medical examiner who'd signed off on dozens of suspicious deaths. Jamal had been building a case against private prison contractors when he died. The same contractors now facing RICO charges. Regina learned the truth in Dr. Baptiste's office. She sat motionless as Simone presented the forensic evidence, the witness statements, the undeniable conclusion that her husband had been murdered. "He was getting too close," she said quietly, "just like Dante did." Regina's grief transformed into crystalline determination. This fight wasn't just about her son anymore. It was about honoring Jamal's sacrifice and dismantling the system that killed him. Meanwhile, Maria Santos received an anonymous package, internal Sentinel Justice documents outlining their youth incarceration enhancement strategy, complete with racial demographic targets and quota requirements. The whistleblower's note read, "I can't stay silent anymore. Publish everything." Senator Drummond's committee hearing filled every news channel. She sat behind the elevated desk, flanked by allies, her expression grave. "Attorney General Richardson has abused her office, weaponized federal resources, and compromised the integrity of state judicial systems. We're calling for her immediate resignation." Regina watched from Washington, surrounded by her legal team. Dr. Baptiste touched her arm. "We need you to appear to back down. It's the only way." The strategy was brilliant and painful. Regina held a press conference announcing she was recusing herself from all Georgia-related matters to avoid any appearance of impropriety. The media portrayed it as defeat. The conspirators relaxed, believing political pressure had worked. But behind the scenes, career prosecutors, insulated from political interference, continued building the case. Preacher Johnson and Reverend Caldwell organized massive demonstrations. Keisha Williams, finding courage through solidarity, publicly shared her story of wrongful conviction. Other victims followed. Isaiah worked with community organizers, documenting every family destroyed by the corrupt system. The movement grew larger than any individual case. It became about justice itself. When the conspirators' guard dropped, the trap sprung with devastating coordination. Federal grand juries issued coordinated indictments across 12 states on the same morning that 50,000 people gathered in Atlanta for the Justice for Dante and All Children rally. Maria Santos published her complete exposé. A federal judge ordered Dante's immediate release based on overwhelming evidence. Regina stood at the prison gates as Dante walked free. Their embrace, broadcast worldwide, became an iconic moment. But victory was bittersweet. Months stolen, trauma inflicted, scars that would never fully heal. Judge Whitfield attempted plea negotiations. Robert Harmon was denied bail for a flight risk. D.A. Caldwell's political career ended instantly. Senator Drummond faced criminal investigation as her financial ties to Sentinel Justice Corporation were exposed. The scale of the conspiracy stunned a nation. But as Dante stood in the sunlight, free but forever changed, he understood that accountability was only the beginning. Real justice required rebuilding what corruption had destroyed. 6 months after Dante's exoneration, the courtroom felt different. Federal District Judge Amara Washington presided over the sentencing of those who'd orchestrated the conspiracy. Judge Harold Whitfield, once powerful and arrogant, sat diminished at the defense table. His sentence, 25 years in federal prison. District Attorney Vincent Caldwell received 30 years. Detective Raymond Foster, who'd fabricated evidence and threatened witnesses, faced 20 years. Robert Harmon, CEO of Sentinel Justice Corporation, was sentenced to life in prison under RICO statutes. His $4 billion empire had been dismantled, its contracts canceled, its business model exposed as industrial-scale human trafficking disguised as criminal justice. Senator Patricia Drummond had resigned in disgrace, facing her own criminal investigation for corruption and obstruction of justice. The evidence Maria Santos had published, the internal documents, the financial records, the explicit racial targeting strategies had sparked a national reckoning with the private prison industry. But for Dante Richardson, accountability wasn't the same as healing. He sat in his childhood bedroom, now feeling simultaneously too small and too empty. Princeton had deferred his admission with full support, but Dante couldn't imagine leaving Atlanta, couldn't imagine pretending his life could simply resume where it had been interrupted. The nightmares came most nights. The courtroom, the cell, the man with the sharpened metal. His therapist said PTSD was normal, that healing took time. Time. He'd lost 4 months of his life to a system designed to destroy him. 4 months wasn't long in the grand scheme, but it had aged him in ways that couldn't be measured in days. Regina found him staring at his acceptance letter from Princeton. She sat beside him on the bed, this fierce woman who'd taken on an entire corrupt empire to save her son. "You don't have to go if you're not ready," she said gently. "I want to. Eventually. But right now, there's work to do here." The work was at Preacher Johnson's community center, which had expanded into a full legal aid clinic. Dante spent his days teaching young people about their rights, helping families navigate a justice system that was slowly, painfully reforming. He'd become an advocate, a voice for those who'd suffered as he had. Isaiah Thompson worked beside him, having found his calling in activism. His brother Marcus was among the hundreds whose cases were being reviewed for potential wrongful conviction. The process was slow, bureaucratic, frustrating, but it was happening. Isaiah testified before Congress about judicial reform, his story galvanizing support for the Jamal Richardson Justice Act that Regina had championed. Keisha Williams returned to school with a full scholarship. She decided to study law, inspired by her own survival and determined to prevent others from experiencing what she had. On weekends, she volunteered at the community center, sharing her story with younger girls who needed to know that trauma didn't have to define them. Officer Malik Thompson had been reinstated with commendation for his courage in exposing corruption. He now headed a new unit focused on accountability and transparency within the Atlanta Police Department. The work was challenging. Decades of institutional rot couldn't be cleaned out overnight, but it was progress. Maria Santos won multiple journalism awards for her exposés, but she was already investigating similar patterns in other states. The fight against corruption, she'd learned, was never truly over. It required constant vigilance, continued exposure, relentless accountability. On a warm spring afternoon, the Richardson family gathered at Oakland Cemetery for a memorial service honoring Jamal Richardson. For 7 years, they'd mourned him as a victim of a tragic accident. Now they could honor him truthfully, as a martyr who died fighting the corruption that had nearly claimed his son. Reverend Caldwell presided over the service. Hundreds attended, families whose lives had been touched by Jamal's advocacy, young people inspired by Dante's courage, community members who'd found their voices in the movement for justice. Regina spoke first, her voice steady, though tears fell freely. "My husband believed in the promise of America, that justice could prevail over corruption, that truth could overcome lies, that ordinary people could change extraordinary systems. He died pursuing that belief. And though we lost him,
His legacy lives on in every case we reopen, every wrongful conviction we overturn, every life we restore. Then Dante stepped to the podium. The young man who'd once debated abstract principles of justice now spoke from lived experience. "My father taught me that fighting for justice is generational work," he began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "Each generation inherits the battles of those who came before and passes them forward to those who come after. 7 years ago, my father died fighting corruption in the criminal justice system. 4 months ago, that same system tried to destroy me. But we're still here. We're still fighting. And we won't stop until the promise of equal justice under law is a reality, not just a slogan." He gestured to the diverse crowd before him. "Look around you. This is what justice reimagined looks like. Not just punishment for wrongdoing, though that matters. Not just removing corrupt officials, though that's necessary, but building something better in place of what was broken. Creating true accountability. Establishing power that serves rather than oppresses. This work will never be finished, but today we can say it is truly begun." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Among them were dozens of young people whose cases had been reviewed and overturned, families reunited, futures restored. The applause wasn't just for Dante or the Richardson family, it was for a community that had found its voice and its power. As the crowd dispersed, Dante rejoined his mother. Regina placed her arm around her son's shoulders, seeing not just the trauma he'd endured, but the strength he'd discovered within it. "Your father would be so proud of you," she said. "Of us," Dante corrected. "We did this together." They stood before Jamal's memorial stone, newly engraved with the truth. Civil rights attorney. Advocate for justice. Murdered for speaking truth to power. His fight continues. That evening, as sunset painted Atlanta's skyline gold and amber, Dante sat with Isaiah on the steps of the community center. Young people filed past them, heading to study groups and mentoring sessions, their futures a little more secure because someone had fought to make the system fairer. "You think it's enough? Everything we've done?" Isaiah asked. Dante considered the question. "It's not enough. It'll never be enough until every wrongful conviction is overturned, until every corrupt official is removed, until the system truly serves justice. But it's a start. And sometimes, a start is everything." His phone buzzed, a message from Princeton confirming his enrollment for the fall semester. He'd defer 1 more year to continue his work at the community center, but eventually he'd go. He'd study constitutional law like he'd always planned. He'd become the attorney his father had been, the advocate his mother was, the voice for justice that the system needed. Because Dante Richardson had learned the hardest way possible that innocence wasn't protection, that excellence wasn't armor, that the system could consume anyone it chose. But he'd also learned that corruption could be exposed, that justice could prevail, and that one person's courage could ignite a movement that changed everything. The fight for justice was generational work. His father had carried it. His mother had advanced it. Now it was his turn to pass it forward. And as the last light faded from Atlanta's skyline, Dante felt not the weight of trauma, but the strength of purpose. The system had tried to break him. Instead, it had forged him into exactly what it feared most: a voice it couldn't silence, a spirit it couldn't crush, a force for change it couldn't stop. Justice wasn't a destination. It was a journey. And Dante Richardson was just getting started. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.